Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Machette. Today it's the Astrology Star Sister, and my star sister, Madam Simon, is joining me. And friend and colleague, how you doing, Simon?
Very good. Very good now that I'm here and getting to record with you toward the end of the day.
Yes, awesome. So the Astrology Star Sisters are talking about Jupiter in Cancer, square Saturn in Aries. And Madam Simon is an archetypal astrologer, tarot reader, and visionary artist, and her website is iconalchemy.com. So you can find out anything you like or contact her through her website. And my website is alightpath.com, and I'm an astrologer, author, intuitive, and numerologist, certified relationship astrologer, and Dwarf Planet University graduate. So here's a picture of Jupiter. And Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system, known as the king of planets. It's a gas giant, has 95 named moons, has a faint ring around it, has a strong magnetic field, and orbit of Jupiter around the sun is 11.86 years. And Simon, would you like to share about Cancer, please?
So, the sign of Cancer is one of the four cardinal signs. Cardinal signs initiate, they create, they start things. Okay. Its ruling planet is the moon, and it governs the water element. It is reflective, emotional, relates to cyclical energy, and it's intuitive. The mantra for Cancer is I feel. Its key words are sensitive, caring, warm, family oriented, sentimental, feeling, intuitive. Another key word I like to associate with Cancer is domestic. Okay. It's some of the cautions for it are that it can be oversensitive, it can take things very personally. There can be a lack of boundaries at times, and it can seem controlling or passive aggressive because it's trying to safeguard itself and its environment.
And then here's a picture of Saturn. And would you like to talk about Saturn?
So Saturn's orbit is about 29.4 years. It has 7 main rings around it and 274 moons. Awful lot of moons. It traditionally rules Capricorn and Aquarius. It is associated with structure, responsibility, discipline, rules and regulations, government, hard work, boundaries, karma, maturity, authority, sense of duty, patience, and perseverance. It's also associated with restrictions, limitations, fear, self-doubt, hardship, and depression. Okay. The knees, legs, bones, joints, tendons, ligaments, teeth, and skin are all signified by Saturn in medical astrology. And it's associated with old age. And the planet Saturn is named after the Roman god of agriculture and wealth, who is the father of Jupiter.
Thank you. And Saturn is in Aries. It's a fire element of passion, enthusiasm, a trailblazer. It's also in the cardinal modality, initiates creative beginning of a new cycle, and the ruling planet is Mars. And the mantra is I am. And some keywords are active, energetic, adventurous, assertive, independent. And some cautions are overly aggressive, pushy, temperamental, and self absorbed. Did you want to add anything?
Um, Aries, since it is associated with Mars, can also be very impulsive. Um, it's got this kind of a sense of immediacy about it. It's not inclined to wait.
Yeah, it's all about action.
Yeah. And now.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so here is Jupiter square Saturn. So they're both at 1 degree and 18 minutes, and they're 90 degrees away from each other. And this is the chart for Seattle, Washington. And it occurs on June 15th at 7:36 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and on the east coast of the US at 10:36 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And do we want to talk just about the square first?
Yeah, why don't we have a chat about that part first, because it is kind of important. Um, so, Jupiter, when Jupiter is in hard aspect to Saturn, there is this kind of, um, tug of war going on between faith and fear, between hope and despair, between optimism and pessimism. And so uh, this square then, and this is the third square in a series. Let's see, the first would have been, oh goodness, last August. Actually, as I recall, it was the first day of the Democratic National Convention. And the second one, I think, was on Christmas Eve, if I remember correctly, in December. And so this one is the third and final of those squares. Except now both planets have moved into different signs than they were at the beginning of this cycle. And so there is some of that kind of wrapping up energy, even though they are both in cardinal signs now. They were in these mutable signs before, which is that wrapping up kind of energy. But now, there's still that last, it's like we got to deal with some of those lessons we learned when these two were in mutable signs, and now apply them to the new start of them being in these cardinal signs. Okay. Full disclosure, I have a hard aspect between Jupiter and Saturn in my natal chart, which, tends to bias me on the subject, although mine's an opposition, not a square. And I call it no gift without a curse. But what that says is that we need to recognize that there's going to be both good and bad in equal measure, that things that may seem very bad actually may have silver linings that prove to be, much better than anticipated, and that things that look very good might be worth examining. This is the time to actually look the gift horse in the mouth. And, after Jupiter has spent so much time in Gemini with, just bombarding us with conflicting information and, stuff that we can't really be certain of, the veracity of it, the applicability of it to real life, right? We've seen a proliferation, for example, of AI that is getting increasingly better at mimicking real life, but is in fact not real life. And we've still got, the sun in Gemini as well. So there's still that sense of big information, big data, but not necessarily accurate data. And so now Jupiter, having just recently moved into Cancer, is like, we want to kind of pull back from some of that big data and now get into our feelings. Okay. But the big data is still perhaps driving a bit of hype. Okay. And so this is a time when we need to apply some Saturnian discernment to make sure that we're not being misled by something seeming much better than it is. But at the same time, not get caught up in catastrophizing either. Noting that Saturn is so close to Neptune and is going to be for a while this summer. Okay. um, that there can be a real potential for um, going off half cocked on the basis of misinformation or, glamour or hype or, things that look really nice, but it turns out are, you know, AI slop or some equivalent, right? Um, and so, when Jupiter is squaring that combination of that Saturn and Neptune there, and I think the actual Jupiter Neptune square perfects at the beginning of next week. Um, when we've got that combination, Jupiter is very enthusiastic, right? Jupiter likes to get excited about things, okay, and be joyful, jovial, okay, to have a good sense of humor and a kind of a philosophical outlook and to take things in stride. And that's great, except when it's not, because we're not being discerning enough or not putting some good boundaries on things that need some boundaries. And so that's what Saturn's in the mix for, but neither of them are playing very nicely together.
Well said. And one of our viewers that's watching says hello. So we welcome all of our viewers. We enjoy having you here and supporting us. Okay. So now we're going to go and talk about one of the aspects. We have a Thor's hammer. So the square between Jupiter and Saturn, they're both sesquiquadrate to Juno in Scorpio. So go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, and Juno is retrograde here, right? Um, and I've talked a bit in your previous shows here about how Juno in Scorpio, being retrograde in Scorpio, is definitely reconsidering, what makes up the social fabric. What is the social contract? What are we agreeing to do or not do in order to uphold our institutions, our relationships, both personal and collective relationships, right? And Scorpio, tends to bring like some intensity and maybe some ruthlessness to the picture. Okay. It can have us distrusting the nature of our current relationships and institutions, distrusting the agreements, the contracts, um, the things that we have previously, said, oh yeah, sure, I'm fine with doing that, in order to continue to have things go forward, to continue to have these institutions and relationships maintained. Here's where I'm willing to compromise in order to make those things be able to continue. But in this situation with Juno retrograde, now we're kind of like, am I really willing to keep doing that? Does that really serve my interests? Am I being used? Are, people up to no good behind the scenes? There can definitely be like suspicion and even paranoia here. So it's important, again, to apply our discernment to that. Okay. And also apply, some measure of hope and faith in the good parts of humanity, right? Jupiter in Cancer is, among other things, has hope and faith and optimism where those who are closest to us are concerned, where family is concerned, where our good friends, our nearby community, the people who, who we've known for a long time and we've gotten to trust. Okay. And so that's actually putting some pressure on that Juno, this combination of Jupiter square Saturn, both faith and fear, both hope and despair. Okay. Both optimism and pessimism. When they're duking it out together, Juno's the one who's taking the brunt of it, being like, oh, Now what do I do? Okay. Um, so that can definitely increase anxiety about uh, our social situations, both on the personal and the collective level. Okay. Both with regard to what's in our immediate neighborhoods and what's going on in the larger world. Okay. So if we're hearing world events and we're feeling like hunkering down with, you know, just a few trusted people, okay, that's part of what's going on there. Taurus hammers can bring about a lot of feelings of pressure and even like survival level fear. And so it's important not to get too worked up at this time, not to feel like, oh my goodness, the sky is falling, right? Because Scorpio can bring a sense of the apocalyptic, you know, doom, whoa, okay. But that doesn't actually mean everything is terrible, okay?
Well,
Um,
and I would say that there's a potential for, uh, secrets or information to come out that maybe people or the collective or, uh, a country, any kind of relationship that there's that potential for possibility.
Yeah. And just keeping some sense of balance, some sense of equilibrium between that Jupiter and Saturn combination, I think is really important here because, like you said, some things may be revealed, information we didn't have before, um, or we may feel very different, in a short while when we're not having the same level of pressure. Um, and, remember that Scorpio is about transformation,
Mhm.
death and rebirth. Okay. So it's real easy to get caught up in fears of like things ending to the point that we forget about the rebirth part. And that rebirth part can be pretty amazing, right? And often is more amazing because of the difficulties that we've endured, the scary feelings we've confronted in the process.
Well said. So, on this slide, we have Jupiter aspects to other planets in the sky here. So we have Jupiter's conjunct the Sun, sextile to Mars, trine Vesta, and Black Moon Lilith, square Saturn and Neptune, because Saturn and Neptune are conjunct also, which Simon mentioned. Quincunx to Pluto and sesquiquadrate Moon and Juno. So where
Yeah.
would you start?
Well, that actually means that, like, a few hours after the exact square from Jupiter to Saturn, there's a second Taurus hammer going on.
Mhm.
That's an overlapping set of Taurus hammers between the one that I just described and, the moon square Juno with Jupiter at the apex. That one's much more fleeting. It's only going to last for a few hours because of the moon's involvement. But it again, it kind of hints at what I was talking about before about the need to, keep the faith, even when things are looking scary. But at the same time, don't give in to hype. Right? Do not
I
get
would
high on your own supply. Do not assume that everything that you're being told is true, but at the same time, don't devolve into paranoia. Okay. And that moon that is in Aquarius is collectively oriented, right? So it's concerned with what is happening on the social level, but it's also concerned with being logical about things. Okay. Um, so let's see. The sun is applying to a conjunction with Jupiter. It's not going to be really fully, in the thick of feeling like it's conjunct until next week when we see it enter Cancer. The sun will have the Cancer ingress at the summer solstice. But we can already have a sense of Jupiter's bigness affecting the sun. And one thing that can happen when we've got the sun conjoining Jupiter is that people get a little full of themselves. Their egos get a little inflated. They can be extra exuberant and boisterous. Okay. And it's great to have a good sense of fun and enthusiasm, but we can get so enthusiastic that we forget to be discerning again. So there's that to pay attention to, and that's going to be in effect, from the time of the square all on through the next week. Okay. And then let's see. So there's that sextile to Mars. Mars is actually applying to the sextile with Jupiter because Mars is going to enter Virgo. I believe that's also next week. It's interesting because, Mars is a malefic just like Saturn is. Malefics being planets who do things in ways that humans tend to find a little extreme, a little difficult to deal with. It doesn't mean they're actually bad. Okay. And depending on what your relationship is with Mars or with Saturn in your natal chart, you may have a very different experience of these transits based on that. Liz, you and I are both Capricorns, so we have a different experience of Saturn than some other folks do. At the same time, you're born in a day chart, I'm born in a night chart. So you get along with Saturn a little better than I do, and I get along with Mars a little better than you do. Okay. So that said, Jupiter is in aspect to both malefics. Now, one's a hard aspect and one's a supportive aspect, but still, archetypally speaking, that suggests a greater potential for, among other things, extremism. Okay. For people to be a little over the top, especially with that sun applying to the conjunction with Jupiter. Now, the benefits of Mars sextile Jupiter can be an enthusiasm for work, okay, for getting things done, whether that's paid work or work around the house. Probably work around the house since it's Jupiter in Cancer. Okay. But, Mars currently in Leo is going to be answering to that sun. And so is going to want to do things that help us to get seen, to get some attention to the things that we're excited about, to our passions. And then when Mars enters Virgo, that sextile may reflect a bit more of a desire to get things done with an orientation towards service, okay, or toward learning. Gardening is well supported by this. As well
I'm
as
already working out in my yard.
yeah, Liz, you've just been doing amazing gardening work lately, so I can definitely tell you're you're experiencing this already. So I think it's important for us to recognize the potential to harness those transits. That Mars sextile is just waiting there for you to, use it to help you get things done, which is excellent. But at the same time, remember, it's still Mars. And so people can be maybe a little extra temperamental because of that. And that Mars is ruling that Saturn-Neptune combination. So all of this feels like there's a bit of rocket fuel going on. Okay. Because Jupiter sextile Mars, Jupiter makes things bigger. Mars is ruling the Saturn and Neptune. Okay. And so even though Saturn is usually not a go, go, go kind of planet, it's in Aries. It can't help but answer to Mars, right? So there may be some immediacy to roadblocks that we experience that we're then kind of chomping at the bit to deal with. Okay. Okay. So let's see, Jupiter quincunx Pluto, that suggests that our feelings of faith in our home, our family, our friends, our local community, those with whom we most closely identify, those feelings are kind of at odds with the current societal power structure. Okay. So, the oligarchs have been on a rampage lately. um, the technocracy is in full swing, big data and AI and Big Brother and all of that. And there's this authoritarianism going on in various governments, especially here in the United States, unfortunately, but it's happening elsewhere as well. Okay. And when you've got two planets in a quincunx, they fundamentally do not get each other. They do not share a modality and they do not share an element. And so it's like they're stuck in a relationship where they don't know how to navigate it. They don't know how to communicate with each other. They don't know what they have in common. Okay. Now, you can find some ways to balance the quincunx energy a bit when you have to kind of work a little obliquely to see what these signs may have in common. The one big thing that I see that both Cancer and Aquarius have in common is an orientation toward the group. Okay. With Cancer, it's a close-knit group. With Aquarius, it's the group of humanity as a whole. And so I think that the lesson that is in this transit is that, it can be real easy, especially when we're scared of things going on in the larger world, to, kind of huddle with our crew and not want to let in those who are not part of our crew, and not feeling like we can relate to the people who are outside of our crew. But it's important for us to recognize that all of humanity is part of our crew. Okay. Just because we don't see where we have things in common with some other folks doesn't mean that they are not human beings deserving of respect and consideration. Okay. And so this transit suggests to me, it is helpful now to try to consider that even when somebody's maybe pushing your buttons and you're like, I've got nothing in common with them, to sit back and say, oh, wait a minute, they are a human being. How can we find some sort of common ground? Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I've got to say on those.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we have some questions and comments from the audience. So the first one is, how will this affect a cardinal sign the most? Or will this affect a cardinal sign the most? Asking because Saturn rules Capricorn also, and I am a Virgo and have Saturn square Jupiter.
Okay, well, cardinal signs in the first 10 degrees of cardinal signs, I mean, that first decan, may be feeling this. Those who have personal placements within the first 3 or 4 degrees of cardinal signs are also really likely to feel this most. I think that when we've got personal stuff that's being touched by these transits, they can feel extra. Okay. But that, among other things, means that we need to take extra time for ourselves to process things. I strongly recommend, when you're experiencing some kind of tough stuff that might be related to these transits, to sit down, take a deep breath, maybe do some journaling. Okay. keep track of the things that you think might be related to the transit and write them down. And then, maybe do some meditation or thinking about what are ways that you can maybe flip that energy a little bit to use the more positive elements of it rather than the things that feel oppressive.
That's wonderful. Okay, the next comment is, do we best keep calm and gardening? And I would say yes.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on your physical ability, it could be to release some of that tension through some form of exercise. Like I try to walk on the beach 5 miles at least one time a week. And I do a lot of gardening, so I love that. And I want to thank our audience and for all the questions. And we're going to get back to our next slide. So, and the next one is with the Saturn aspects. And we have, like we've mentioned before, Saturn is conjunct Neptune. Saturn is sextile Uranus and Pluto, square the Sun, and quincunx Mars, and sesquiquadrate to Juno. So you can start if you like.
Oh, okay. So, um, that sextile to Uranus and Pluto, it's a little tighter with Pluto. It's going to get more close with Uranus as Uranus heads over toward Gemini. Uranus will be entering Gemini, I believe, at the beginning of July.
Yes.
Okay. So, yep. So a little under a month from now. Okay. And so that's part of this sort of on again, off again minor grand trine that we've been experiencing between all three of the outer planets with Saturn in the mix now. Okay. Conjoining Neptune. And when, having all three outer planets have been making this big, once in a lifetime switch, where they're all changing from yin signs, earth and water signs, to yang signs, air and fire signs, within a relatively short period of time. Okay. So since the last November, when Pluto went into Aquarius for the final time, and between then and Uranus's entry into Gemini in July, that's just a 9-month period for all three outers to switch signs at once, and to do so in a way that really emphasizes one elemental way of doing things over another. Okay. So it makes things much more active, also more heady rather than body oriented. Okay. And that combination might feel a little intense, right? It's a really big change in the zeitgeist. These are generational planets. So, they move slowly, okay? Very, very slowly. And their transit through any single sign marks a generation, okay? It has a strong impact for everybody who is born under that particular placement. Okay, so we've got that as the background. That's the backdrop going on right now. And then Saturn has joined with Neptune now into that scenario. Okay, and Saturn, one of the things about Saturn is that Saturn can take some of the big concepts that we associate with the outer planets and bring a strong sense of reality to it. It's not just something that's way out there. It's not just something that, okay, it's like a big world thing, but it doesn't really pertain to me. Right? Saturn makes it more present for us, and in Aries makes it more immediate. Okay. Aries One of the things about Aries is that it is associated with the notion of identity. Who are you? We establish that with Aries, since it's the beginning of the zodiac, youngest sign. Our first step in the process of consciousness and becoming individuated is to, say, oh, I am something distinct from mama. I am something distinct from my siblings and my family. I may be part of them, but I'm a different person. Okay. And so now Saturn in that space is saying, yeah, now we as individuals are, even as we're part of this much bigger collective that is represented by those transcendental generational planets. Okay. It brings it home. So that is really interesting in the context of this square, right? Because with Jupiter in Cancer is also bringing it home, just on the more family oriented level. And so for a lot of people, there can be this kind of waking up to, oh my goodness, there's these things going on in the world that previously I did not think had a lot to do with me. And now I'm finding they do have something to do with me. And I'm feeling called to sit up and pay attention to them. And that can be a little scary and a little uncomfortable, especially if you've been used to going, hey, I want nothing to do with the news cycle. Okay. Which, I get that. But at the same time now, these things are really drawing more attention. Okay. The square to the sun also, that suggests drawing our awareness to uncomfortable things. Okay. Saturn is not known for comfort. Jupiter in Cancer really likes comfort. Okay. But Saturn in Aries, yeah, no interest in comfort. Okay. And so that also can contribute to feeling a bit jarring when it comes to our awareness of the things that are going on in the world, the things that are going on, whether in the news cycle or in government or what have you. Okay. And the key thing for us to remember is that, well, we absolutely as individuals cannot tackle it all. Okay. We cannot bear the weight of the world on our shoulders. But we can, as individuals, step into our own sense of responsibility. Okay. What am I here for? And what is my larger vision, since it's connected to Neptune? Okay. And, how can I contribute on an individual level? And I can, oh, look at that Jupiter there, and the sun's going to be joining Jupiter. I can do that through connecting with my people locally. Okay. So I can pay attention to what's happening globally or nationally, be alert to it, but not be run by it, and instead find things that we can do to address those things bit by bit within our own community, within our own family, within our own friend circles. Okay. And then Saturn being quincunx Mars, it's a little uncomfortable too, right? Both malefics being malefics and being over the top. And Saturn is answering to Mars, but then because it's quincunx to Mars, it may be like, what are the marching orders? I don't quite know what you're trying to tell me. So, yeah. And especially since Saturn is also conjoining Neptune, we may be confused about what part is ours, about what we're taking responsibility for. Okay. And so I want to use this as a reminder that even when we may feel like we, oh, I'm just kind of waking up to what is my part in all of this now. Maybe I feel a little guilty for not having paid attention before. This is not a time to beat ourselves up. Okay. If we do not understand something, What's the great thing we can do? Let's go back to that sun that is still in Gemini and let's get some information. Let's ask some questions. Let's communicate about our confusion, because there may be somebody else who, has the Saturnian wisdom and is unafraid to tell it to us.
And I like the Saturn answering to Mars, because I think of Saturn as the brakes and Mars as the gas pedal, and Saturn's in Mars's sign, so Mars is probably moving a little bit faster than normal.
Well, Mars is at that last degree of Leo, right? And has been, getting some passionate go juice from the sun, right? Leo governs the heart, governs what we are passionate about, what we wish to be creative and expressive about. And so Mars in Leo then is action as a means of personal expression. And especially when we're feeling anxious or helpless or anything like that, taking actions that align with our values, that align with our passions, that align with our sense of identity, all of those can be helpful, right? They can also be a little extreme in some cases, and there's definitely people who are doing that. But, if we're acting with some measure of discernment, if we're trying to make sense of the connection with Saturn, even when it's confusing, then paying attention to what are the things that truly matter to me. Okay. I like to remind people that Saturn is the Lord of Time. And as the Lord of Time, Saturn is very aware that we all have only so much time on the planet. What are you going to do with your time? That's what Saturn asks. And in Aries, like I said, Aries has that sense of immediacy. So it may very much feel like, there's this ticking of the clock.
I'm running out. Move, move, move.
move. And that can be anxiety inducing if we're not careful, right? But it also asks us to prioritize. Okay. You cannot do all the things all the time. You cannot do all the things at once. You will never be able to do all of the possible things within your lifetime. So, which of the possibilities are the ones that matter to you most? Which are the things that you want to get done before you die? Which are the things that you do not want to leave undone at the end of your life? And if you think of those things in those terms, then you are more likely to do the things that align with your passions, that Mars in Leo. And so, again, even though there's a quincunx, it's a quincunx that is currently still within 2 fire signs, still has that sense of immediacy and passion. And then when Mars moves into Virgo, yes, it's going to be in that truly different modality and element, but it is still going to carry forward some of the sense of discernment and the potential for our ideals to lead us to service and to lead us to refining our actions so that we do only and wholly what we must do.
I totally agree. And we have another comment from the audience. Saturn the teacher.
Yeah.
So
Oh, big time. But I think in this case, this is teaching that requires doing. This is not just like a lecture or seminar or something like this. This is a hands-on class.
participation is required.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And I want to thank you, Madam Simon, for joining me and doing this episode. It was a great spending time with you. And a joy as always, and I look forward to our next episode. Um,
Thank you.
and then I'll let you tell about your Patreon.
Yeah, so I have a Patreon page where I write about the ongoing astrological transits. I do custom astrological art for patrons. I do a variety of art and share different kinds of art images that I think are relevant to the transits, especially. And the transits often inform how my art processes are working. Okay. So I talk to people about that there. I'm also a consulting astrologer, like Liz is. If you wish to schedule a consultation with me, please visit me at iconalchemy.com. And if you're one of the folks who likes to have in person consultations, I do both astrology and tarot. And I'm doing that at a couple of live events this week. Getting out more than I normally do. But and those events can be found on my website. There's, let's see, the Belltown Art Walk. There's an event at the Crystal Lounge in Belltown, Seattle, Washington. And I will also be at the Pacific Northwest Witches Market Letha celebration for the summer solstice.
Thank you. And like Simon said, I do consultations. I have a newsletter and a YouTube channel, so I appreciate you subscribing and your support and everybody that's watching. I have a variety of other shows that I do, so there's a lot to choose from. Um, so come back and check out some other shows that we have here on the channel. I will be on Talk Cosmos on June 15th, talking about the Cancer new moon karmic readjustment. I'm part of the archetypal symbols team. And I'm going to say thanks everybody again, and thanks Simon, and we'll be back again soon. So we look forward to having I look forward to having you, Simon, on, and our guests, our audience too. So we're going to say sign off and say goodbye for now, but thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Liz.